We all want to create great 3D experiences for visionOS, but we're iOS developers, not 3D designers, so how do we do that? I'm going to show you how using a 3D design tool called Spline. We're going to create a simple visionOS app that has 3D content for windows, volumes, and even immersive spaces. Then I'll show you how to speed up your development time using Spline Mirror, which allows you to preview your 3D designs in real time on the Apple Vision Pro device. That way you don't have to export to Xcode, build the Xcode project just to see it in action, which allows for rapid iterations on your designs. I'm a big fan of this product, especially when building for visionOS, and I gotta thank them for sponsoring today's video. I had a ton of fun building all this 3D content, and I bet you will too. To demonstrate Spline and Spline Mirror, we're gonna build this simple visionOS app. As you can see, we have a window showing our 3D character with two buttons on it. The first button opens up a volume that has our 3D character in it, and then we can place it wherever we like. And the second button will open up an immersive space so we can go on a little adventure with our character. But before we build this, we need that 3D content first, and that's where Spline comes in. Spline is a no-code workflow to create 3D content for the Apple ecosystem. You know, iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and like you'll see in this video, visionOS. It's a design tool like a Sketch or a Figma, but specifically for 3D designs, and their goal is to make it easy to create 3D content for the Apple platforms and the web. And they do a pretty good job of it, as you'll see. They have a web app or a native Mac app that you can download at spline.design. And a quick side note, they recently released a 15-minute Apple-like keynote, very high quality, showcases a ton of features. Definitely check that out, link will be in the description. Let's talk about the various ways you can get 3D content, because you're an iOS developer. It's highly unlikely you're also a great 3D designer. So of course, the obvious one is you could work with a 3D designer, or maybe your company already has one. But I bet for most of you, that's probably pretty cost prohibitive. And this is where Spline can be amazing. So there's a couple different ways to get 3D content from Spline. So we have the built-in library, which is already ready-made assets. And you have a group of assets, which are these scenes that you're seeing here. I can go to the environment. Interactive 3D, and I'm going through this pretty quickly here, different character sets you can use. So those are full-blown scenes with multiple objects, or as you can see, I'm clicking the Objects tab. Now these are a bunch of individual objects you can use however you see fit. For example, we're going to use a character. We're going to use this child up here in the upper right. We'll come back to that, but you see a whole list of characters you can use. Anyway, there's a ton of pre-existing assets, and there's also a community tab, if there's not enough there, where Spline's community is creating a whole bunch of assets as well. As you can see, I'm scrolling through. You got like an F1 car here, all kinds of cool stuff. So you can have these ready-made assets that either Spline has given you in their library or what the community's built. But to take that even further, like I'm gonna go to the library, because this is what we're gonna do in this tutorial, is I'm gonna take Spline's existing asset here. Let's go to our objects, our character. Let's go ahead and grab it right here. If I double click on child 2, you're gonna see me open up into the design tool, and now I have full control over this. Sure, I have this great starting template, but as you're gonna see, I can change it up a bit. But before we do all that, the last thing you can do to get 3D content, back to Spline's main page here, is the tutorials. You can learn how to build these designs yourself. And as you can see, Spline has a ton of awesome tutorials to teach you how to use their tool, to teach you how to do animations, lighting, shadows, all this stuff to create great 3D content. And if you're in this for the long haul, I believe visionOS, yeah, it's the first iteration. It might not be there yet, but I definitely think this is where it's going. So I think it's a good investment to start learning at least the basics of 3D design. I'm not saying you gotta be a full-blown professional 3D designer, but at least knowing the basics and being able to do a little bit on your own, I think is really gonna serve you well in this spatial computing Apple Vision Pro future. But this video isn't about learning how to design, it's about getting these designs into Xcode and visionOS and into your apps. And on that note, Spline isn't just for visionOS. You can export these designs, get SwiftUI code to use in iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. In fact, I just recently did a video all about that, where we build this onboard screen together and we dive deeper into the design tool. So if you want to dive into working with Spline for, say an iPhone app or an iPad app, check out the video I just did, link will be in the description. So back to our character here, because this is what we're going to use in our windows, as you see here. We're gonna open them up in a volume. We're even gonna drop them into our immersive space, just to show you how you can build a little bit with Spline. Okay, so just to give a quick little preview of the design tool, because again, this is a full-blown design tool. This is very, very deep. But I'm just gonna change some colors around on our little character here. We'll call him our study buddy here. So I'm gonna hit Command plus to zoom in a little bit, and let's scroll down just so he's big and you can see him in the video. So over here on the left, I can hit the disclosure indicator, and you can see I can edit all the individual elements here. But as you can see on the right, there's also these materials, which are kind of like the color theme of the asset. So this is easier and quicker just to demonstrate for you. So as you can see, this wood color is the color of his hoodie. I want to make this color gray. Let's give him like a light gray hoodie there. And then if I go to his hair over here on the left, see the disclosure indicator, I can click on the hair and then you see it's default orange. Let's go ahead and give him some blonde hair. So scroll up there, make it yellow a little bit. There we go. And over here on the left, I can change his glasses. Instead of red, can make those, you know, like a darker gray. There we go. And then now the ears aren't quite matching because we got rid of the orange hair. So now if I go to the hat, and again, that's what I'm talking about. You can basically dismantle all these pre-existing assets and customize every little bit of it. You can animate body parts if you're really good working with 3D. That's kind of like next level stuff. I'm just changing the color. That's like the absolute basics, but there's so much you can do in this design tool. So to fix the ears here, this ear white part, we're going to just make it a darker or a lighter version of the gray for the hoodie. Cool. So that's our study buddy. That's what we're going to use for our window and our volume. And actually I want to go to the scene here because if you just export it like this, you're going to get this dark gray background. So if I click on the scene in the left and over here on the right, the background color, let's take the opacity down to 0. And you see you get the classic checkered background to let you know there is no opacity. And I did that so it shows up in the window just like this, right? There's no black background. Looks natural in the visionOS window. And by the way, that Spline watermark is only there if you're on the free plan. If you go to the paid plan, you don't get that watermark. And I'm going to zoom back out to 100%. So you can see it looks kind of small. If I click on them, I'm going to hold shift and drag because if you don't hold shift, you get them all distorted, right? We don't want to do that. So let's do Command Z, hold shift. Let's make him a little bigger there so he fills up our window. Is not just a tiny little character in there. And then you can see our light sources up there. You can see the angle. So I'm going to drag him down a little bit so the light source affects him differently. There we go. Okay, so this is our character. This is what we're going to use for the windows and the volume. Again, you can go nuts with doing animations, adding elements to them, whatever you want to do. But we're going to switch to our immersive space because we got the window and the volume asset ready to go. So back to the home page here. I'm going to go to library. Let's do environment. And we're just going to start off with this town and Vespa minigame. Real quick, as you know, Apple Vision Pro, brand new product. visionOS, still basically a beta, right? It's 1.0. So all these tools around visionOS are still very new, and Spline is no exception. So some of these 3D environments that are already made aren't quite ready for visionOS yet. And the way to test that, so let's open up this mini room. And I say this not a knock on Spline. They're rapidly building features. So if you're watching this in the future, this may be a moot point, but I want to show you. If you hit export, and go to visionOS. I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves here. We're going to actually export the assets later, but I wanted to show you, as you can see, unsupported features. I'm going to hit continue here, but you can see this little support roadmap here, right? You can see what's in progress, volume embeds, events in action, material layers, what's coming soon. So again, Spline is rapidly building. So if you're watching this in the future, all this is probably already built. So let's close this mini room, go back to the environment that I have tested. I'm going to delete this. Go to the library. I know this environment here, the Town Vespa minigame, this does work with visionOS when you export it. So if you hold Option and drag around, you can move the camera. So here's our, So here's our 3D world here. And it looks really, really cool in the Vision Pro, which you'll see later. Here we are with our 3D environment. And just like I did with the character, you can go nuts and change the color of all these elements. Maybe, you know what, like, hey, I don't want this bookshop. Delete. Come on, come back. Get that building back. But you see, you can just, again, full control to change everything. All I'm going to do to keep this simple, let's go back to our child, is if I click on the child here, I'm going to Command C to copy, and then go back to our Vespa mini game, and I'm going to just click here and paste in the child. So you can see up here in the upper right, there's the child. Let's see, he's huge. Let's bring him over here. And now you got to learn how to use these 3D tools here. Maybe you're familiar with it, but as you can see, okay, he's obviously giant. So I'm going to shift, grab one of these. Let's make him small. Bring him down here. Make him small. I'm going to make him look like he is sitting over here, just kind of like waiting for a ride. Option, move my camera around. He still looks pretty big here. So make him a little smaller. Bring him down to the ground. There's a shadow. Cool, and there he is. I dropped him into the scene. It kind of looks like he's waiting to get picked up on this Vespa. But I only did that real quick and I deleted the building just to show you how you can add stuff to these scenes. You can change colors, you can delete stuff. That's why I think they give you a great template to start from. And then, you know, the world is your oyster if you don't want to create one from, you know, zero from scratch. Okay, so now that we think our designs are in a good spot, the next step for actually building would be to export them and bring them into Xcode and then run Xcode and test them. But Spline has an awesome tool called Spline Mirror that's a visionOS app, so you need the Apple Vision Pro to actually see this, but it allows you to preview your designs before you get them in your project so you can do rapid iteration. So if you see something that's off with the design, maybe you want to tweak a color, because looking at it on here is going to look totally different than the real Apple Vision Pro device. As you can see, Spline has some built-in objects and environments that you can play around with to get some ideas, and Spline Mirror will show off what these assets look like in a window, as you can see right here. You can also open them up in a volume to see how they look and feel there, and you can even explore them in a fully immersive space. Now let me show you a very cool workflow in the Apple Vision Pro, because we can mirror our MacBook, right? And have the Spline app open. So as you can see here, I have the Spline app open that I can work and tweak my designs, and then I can send it to the Spline Mirror app over here to the left, where I can quickly preview my design. So what you're seeing here is I changed the hoodie color on our Study Buddy, and I got to see that real quick in Spline Mirror, put them back on my desk so I can compare very quickly what the different colors look like, again, in real time on my device. Because the alternate path is, all right, let me export this to Xcode, let me run the Xcode project, do all this stuff, right? It really cuts down on the development and the iteration time for your 3D content designs. All right, so we're happy with how our 3D content looks in windows, volumes, and spaces. Now let's export these designs into SwiftUI code and put them into Xcode to get into our visionOS app. First, we need an Xcode project. So let's go to Xcode here and create new project. This is going to be a visionOS project, just an app. Hit next. Call it Spline Test 2. Yeah, I've been playing around with this. We'll say Spline visionOS. Initial scene is a window. My immersive space is going to be none, because we're going to add that separately later. We just want a very bare bones basic visionOS app right now. So hit next, create it on your desktop. And we're not actually going to use reality kit content. This is for like the built-in stuff that they give you, kind of like their little Hello World app. We will keep the VStack because we will use that. So the first thing we're going to export is our character in a window. So if I go back to Spline, let's go back to our child copy right here. So here's our child. I've made him bigger. So let's hit export. Again, like I said, you hit visionOS. Now this embed iOS, this is what I did in my previous video when we built this onboarding screen. So if you're interested in that, go check that out. This is going to be specifically for visionOS because we are using volumes and spaces. And speaking of volumes and spaces, view mode, window. If I click this, you see I get window, volume, immersive space. The first one we're going to do is a window. We will do the other two. And again, you can see the support roadmap. Not everything is yet supported. visionOS is brand new. Spline is working hard to rapidly support all this stuff. So if I hit update, just make sure I have the latest, and I'm basically gonna copy this code right here. So I'm gonna hit this little copy button. And if I go back into Xcode, we're gonna do it down here because it gives us a full content view, body. We're gonna yank out what we need from this. But as you can see, I forgot this important step here, SplineRunTime. So I'm gonna cut that and put that in here. Let me finish this code, but we're gonna have to bring in the Spline package, which we'll do here in a second. And we'll get rid of this import SwiftUI because we already have it. But instead of content view, I'll call this character view. We are fetching from the cloud. When you're doing, if this works in Windows, but not for volumes and spaces, at least as of now, Spline is working on that. So again, if you're watching this in the future, this may work. And if you're using it in an iOS app, iPad app, you have two options. I'm not gonna get into it too much because it doesn't really apply to visionOS yet. If you wanna see me dive deeper into this, check out my previous video. But essentially, you can fetch the Spline scene remotely, which is what we're doing with the URL string here, or you can download that Spline scene and have it in your app. Now there's trade-offs, right? This involves a network call, so you're gonna have to have the internet, and you know all the trade-offs with that, the error handling, what if you have bad internet, all that stuff. The downside of downloading all these assets and storing them in your app is that you can imagine these are like whole 3D worlds. They're not light assets, so your app size is gonna blow up. So again, that's the trade-off. If you're only using one 3D asset, it's probably fine to download into your app. If you're using 20 of these, it's gonna make your app way too big, so you're gonna wanna go remote. So again, that's the decision for how you're using this in your app and to balance the trade-offs there. So we're gonna work on just with remotely, because a benefit of doing it remotely is you can edit your design, and all you have to do is hit update. Your 3D content will update remotely, so that's actually a pretty big benefit. Now that we have this character view, that's what we're gonna have in our VStack. Character view. And what it's doing here, again, this is the URL, and then we're creating a Spline view from that URL, and we're ignoring the safe area there. So you'll see that window in a second. I need to bring in the package. So File, Add Package Dependencies. This probably should have been the first step, but I forgot about it. And I've done Spline videos in the past, so I already have it in my recents, but you would enter the URL that you see right here, and it will pull it up. So I'm gonna add package, let that install. Yep, I wanna add it to this target, add it to any of the appropriate targets. Okay, so our package is good to go, so this will all work. And let's run it in the simulator so you can see it. And as you can see, there's our 3D character in our window. Remember, we removed the background. He's a little bit off center because I think I nudged him over when I made it bigger. That would be a quick little adjustment we can do. But you see the Spline watermark down there. Again, that's because you're on the free plan. If you have the pay plan, you don't do that. So this is just our 3D character in a window. Pretty simple stuff. Now let's do volume, and then we'll do the immersive space after that, because they get progressively a little more involved. So let's stop the simulator. Let's go back to Spline here. So let me actually move him over into the center. That will fix that little off-center thing. So now when I go to export, well, let's update that so I make sure I have the new positioning. And like I said, because we are in Xcode, we're pulling down from remotely. I don't have to download the asset, ship an app update to the App Store, right? So that's a big benefit of remote. It'll just update my 3D content remotely. So back to Spline. Now when I export, I don't want to be in a window up here. I want to be in a volume. And you can't see it here. I said this in my last video. I really hope Spline gives us a way to make this window bigger so I can see the code. Right now I just got to copy it and go back to Xcode, paste it down here. Again, we're going to create our volume view here. I don't need SplineRunTime and SwiftUI. We'll call this volume view. And you notice the big difference. Instead of just a Spline view, here we have a Spline volumetric content from the URL. And again, we're not doing it from local, and I don't need that node fetched from the cloud to keep this nice and clean. So again, we're fetching the 3D content from that URL, and then we're putting it in a Spline volumetric view. Now, in order to open a volume, we have to go to our app, Spline visionOS app, and create a new window group with an ID here, and the ID will just be volume. If you have multiple volumes in your app, of course, you'll need to be a little more specific with what this volume is, but again, super simple visionOS app for demonstration purposes, so I can just get away with the ID of volume. And this will be the volume view that we created back here in the content view. And I'm just keeping this all in one file. Of course, if you're building a real, more in-depth project, you're gonna wanna have better organization. For these tutorials, I like to keep it in the same file just because it's easier to see and understand for the viewer here. So this is the volume view that we're using in our window group. Now we have some modifiers. The first one is window style here. And you can see we can do volumetric because we want it to be a volume. And the next modifier I wanna do is default size with width, height, depth in, and 0.3, 0.3, 0.3 dot meters. Obviously you can see you can have different sizes and different metrics and all that stuff. That's what we're gonna do. To save some time for the video, basically if you don't have a default size, our character is gonna be really, really big, too big for like realistically putting on our desk. So you can give your volume a default size. And again, I tweaked it, played with it. I found 0.3, 0.3 in meters is a good size that'll look good on our desk. Okay, back to the content view. So now that we have the volume view, our app knows how to open it. Now we need to add these buttons, or they're actually gonna be toggles to open up our volume in our immersive space. So I'm gonna put these in an H stack, and this will be a toggle. So the title, I'll say show volume, and then is on, we need a binding. So pretty basic SwiftUI stuff here. At state private var is showing volume, that equals false. And as you can guess, we're gonna need one for the immersive space, so might as well do that while we're here too. At state private var is showing immersive space, that equals false. So the binding for the volume is $ is showing volume. And then this toggle has a toggle style of a button. And then we want an on-change modifier. So, because we want to know when this toggle does something, we need to show or hide the volume. So on-change of is showing volume, we want to, we have old value, new value. We're not gonna use old value, and we'll just call this is showing. And to open up our volume, we're gonna have to call the open window environment variable. So at environment / open window, call this var open window. And we're gonna need the same thing for close window or dismiss window. So dismiss window, call this dismiss window. So we'll say if is showing, say open window, takes an ID, and that ID is volume. Again, the volume is what we gave it right here, that ID. So whatever ID you want to open, make sure you have it that ID. Back to the content view, else dismiss window with ID volume. Again, same concept there. Okay, so real quick review. We exported from Spline into a volume view. Spline gave us a Spline volumetric content, so we have that, we're pulling that down. In our app, we had to create another window group. We gave the ID of volume so we know which one to open. Put our volume view in there. We made it window style volumetric, and then we gave it a default size. Again, I dialed that in to fit on our desk. And then we created a toggle that when that toggle changes, we're opening the window that is ID volume, or we're dismissing the window volume. I'm gonna put some padding on this H stack as well. Okay, let's run it on the simulator to see our volume working with content that we exported from Spline. Okay, there's our window with our character. Now I hit show volume. Takes a second to load, again, because we are pulling from the internet. Here's our volume. I can grab them and put them on our desk right here. It's like our little study buddy. I can, move that window over there, which I might regret later because you kind of remember. So I can't put them on our desk right there. Cool, so our volume is working with our study buddy. And in a second, I'm gonna show it to you on the actual device because, the simulator never does it justice. Okay, so we got our window, we got our volume. Let's stop this. Let's do the last one, the immersive space. And it's pretty similar. So the first thing we'll do is go to Spline. On the export, we'll change the volume to immersive. And I'm gonna hit update just to make sure I have the latest. I should already have it, but just to be safe. Then hit the copy here to get the code. Back to Xcode. and we'll create a immersive view here. Instead of content view, we'll say immersive view. And you can see it's not of type view like the other ones. It's of type immersive space content. Again, var body some immersive space content. We're fetching it from the cloud. We're not doing it locally. And just like the volume before, we now have a spline immersive space content. So we have our character view that's a window. We have our volume view that's a volume, and you can see the different types we're getting. We have our immersive view, which is a spline immersive space. Okay, so just like the volume, we have to go into our app and create our immersive space. So it's not a window group, just immersive space, and we want the ID in content, so we want the ID to be immersive space. And again, if you have more than one immersive space in your app, you would use the IDs accordingly. We're only having one, so I kept it simple. So we want our immersive view that we just created, again, over here in the content view, this immersive view. Now there are some modifiers we want to put on this as well, just like our volume. And that is actually just one modifier, immersion style. By default, so this is a binding, so here we want to put content. The value will be full, and then in full. And what we're saying is here is give me full immersion, not just a little bit immersion, I want all the immersion. So now that we have our immersive space ready to be called, just like we did with our volume, on our content view, we're going to need a toggle. Very similar to this, so I am actually just going to copy and paste this toggle, put it in the H stack down here. Actually, this padding needs to be down there. So toggle style is button, on change of not is showing volume, is showing immersive space. So if it is showing, I don't want to open window or dismiss window. Immersive spaces have their own environment object. So I'll say at environment / open immersive space, var open immersive space. And this another one to dismiss it, environment / dismiss immersive space, var dismiss immersive space. Okay, so actually, and make sure you do this because I did this before where I messed up, where I had the toggle on the wrong one. So make sure this is showing immersive space, not is showing volume. Again, those copy paste errors will always get you. Show immersive space. And then now we use our environment variables here. Open immersive space and ID. Oh, actually, I forgot, this is different. Yep, I'm glad I caught this, or I'm glad Xcode showed me the error. Let me show you what I caught that reminded me. So when I did ID, right, you see async call as function ID used in context that does not support concurrency. So we need to do await. Actually, this whole thing needs to be in a task. So down here, task, and because these are async await functions with the spaces, so await open immersive space with the ID of immersive space. And then down here, await dismiss immersive space. Because there's only one at a time, we don't necessarily need an ID. So again, to recap, we exported from Spline. We got our Spline immersive space view, and we're pulling remotely from this scene. I messed up. I'm glad I caught it. All right, back to Spline. I don't want our character to be an immersive space. Hopefully some of you caught this. I want our town with our character in it to be the immersive space. But this is how easy it is to export from Spline when you already have it in there. Because really all we're changing is the URL. If I go back to Xcode, the only thing that's going to change in this code is this URL. And really it's just this ID right here. So just to show you, rather than copying and pasting all that stuff, and again, I wish I could just, I wish this window was bigger, but hopefully that'll happen in a Spline update. So I'm gonna hit update here to make sure I have the latest and greatest version of my big immersive scene. And I'm going to copy this, bring it into Xcode, paste it down here just so I can pull from it. And like I said, really, I just need this ID right here. That's really all that's different, and I can delete this. So again, once you have the code in place, super simple to switch out scenes. So again, back to my recap. We exported my immersive view, which you just saw. And then in the visionOS app, we had to create our immersive space here with our immersion style of full. And then in the content view, we have a toggle that when we toggle is showing immersive space to true, we open immersive space using the environment variable, or we dismiss it. Okay, so now running this in the simulator should work, hopefully. All right, so yep, we see our buttons, show volume, show immersive space. So we've already shown the volume. Let's show the immersive space. Okay, stay aware of your surroundings. This is the warning. I'm gonna say, don't show me again. And then in our simulator here, we get this window. So let me move this. There we go. We have our character, our study buddy, waiting to get picked up on the Vespa. And you know, the simulator, you can click on these icons to move around a bit, move up and down. If I wanna, you know, go in a circle, go around here. Again, the simulator is tough to work with on Apple Vision Pro, but here's what our app looks like on the actual device. So here I am on my actual Apple Vision Pro device. You can see the app just like we saw in the simulator. The window has our character. I'm going to open up the volume here, move our little study buddy onto my desk to hang out with me and chill. And now I'll open up the immersive space. And as you can see, I'm in a whole new world. I'll actually get up and walk around a little bit to show you different angles. And there's our little study buddy that we dropped in using Spline, combining two different assets from the library to make our own, and we got our study buddy in a whole new world. So that's working with 3D content from Spline in Xcode, SwiftUI, and visionOS. I'm having a blast learning about all this 3D design stuff and playing around, and hopefully you will too. Check them out at spline.design to get started.